What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home here at fakepigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. Here with an update on the Food City Dirt Race. We will not have qualifyings, but we do know the starting grid and we do know how practice went. So it'll help give us a better understanding of how to approach this race from both a betting and DFS perspective. And here to help me do that, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? Yeah, it was interesting going back over these odds and the DK stuff and trying to figure out who are going to be some good values. And this race, more than anyone I've seen thus far this season, has some great values in drivers in DK, and the betting lines have made some amazing movement.
Yeah. So typically we don't have qualifying. Typically we just know, by Wednesday, usually where everyone's starting, and then DK and betting odds kind of bounce off of that. Well, this week we didn't actually have the qualifying, but because of practices, because of the grid, because of a bunch of stuff, the DK prices is kind of locked in, so we can kind of go off of there. But like you said, the line movement is crazy. So let's start with that line movement, and I'll show you based upon our numbers that from when we recorded on Thursday, how dramatic some of these moves are. That's not what I want. Sorry about that. There we go. So Kyle Larson is your favorite. Was 250, now 325. But Brian, he's technically starting first, but he has to go all the way to the back because of an engine change, and then try and work his way all the way back to the front. So, we'll talk DK here in a second, but from a betting perspective, I don't know how you're betting Kyle Larson at plus 325.
I mean, if he's got a really fast car, which I think it was during the first practice of the day, he was right there in the top 5 in terms of speed. So it's not like he doesn't have a good car and won't be able to make up time. But having to start from the back and work through all that traffic during a race where guys are going to be all over the track, it's not going to be like two separate lines. Moving from the very rear all the way to the front is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, so there are a few changes as well based upon how practice went. Stage 1 will now end after 100 laps. It was set to be 75. Stage 2 will end after 200 laps. It was set to be 150. But the race is still 250 laps. There will also be competition cautions at lap 50 and lap 150 for everyone to get out there and make some tweaks to the car, as they will not be doing pit boxes for this race, as we mentioned last time. Each team is also getting an extra set of tires, which I think is interesting. They were showing some of the practice tires, and so, like Austin Dillon, for example, was kind of laying low on him. Like he wasn't going as hard as he probably could because some of these tires on other drivers' cars were completely worn down. So that is interesting news, just kind of from a track setup spot. I guess I'm with you a little more, and I think Kyle Larson can, if he works his way up and takes advantage of these cautions and kind of gets his way through. But it's not like before where if you pit and you come into the pits at 14 and you have a really quick pit stop, you can get out by say 7 or 6, and then you're moving up that as well. So I think that will be interesting. But at 325, I just even if he was starting first, I don't know if I'd still be getting there.
Yeah, there's just not enough payback for something that offers so much volatility in terms of what can happen over the duration of the race.
So let's talk about some of the big risers. We'll start with Kyle. Well, we can start, there's a few names. Kyle Busch going from 18 to 12, I think is really interesting. Chase Elliott going from 20 to 12 is really interesting. Danny Hamlin going from 30 to 14. Some of your big name, well-known drivers, turns out, can race just fine on this dirt, and Vegas is adjusting their lines accordingly. And there's actually a really interesting name or interesting quote from Kyle Busch's crew chief, who was saying that based on the way the race went and by the end of kind of what they expect, this race should run a lot closer to what Bristol typically runs, especially by stage 3, that they think, some of the drivers that traditionally have success on this track, like Kyle Busch, like Kyle Larson, like Joey Logano, could have a ton of success at the end. So Kyle Busch is actually somebody who, even at 12-1, has become a lot more compelling to me. Alex Bowman is also one of your biggest movers. He was 35-1 when we talked about it before. Now down to 12. And then Brian, we're sitting pretty with our William Byron tickets.
Hell yeah.
I got him at 66. He is currently sitting at 25. What'd you get him at?
I got him at 70-1.
Woo! So that's what I call value. Doesn't mean he's going to win, and it doesn't mean that we should be pretending to starting to cash our tickets already. But getting a third of the odds, a little over a half of the odds, that's a hell of a move.
Yeah, I mean, especially too when looking at what my best bet was him to finish top 10, and he's, because of the no qualifying, he's starting in the top 10 in the 8th position. I mean, that's like almost guaranteed money at this point. And then going from a 70-1 favorite or odds to win the race all the way down to 25-1. I mean, finally some recognition his way. Yeah,
for sure. Some of the other drivers going in the other direction, Bubba Wallace fell significantly, as well as my boy Stewart Friesen. I liked Friesen as a guy with a ton of track experience on the dirt. He was 16-1 when I bet him. He's now 33, so I lost a lot of value there. Didn't run super well, and with the arrangement of qualifying, he's actually going to be starting 39th. So I don't, or don't wait,
33rd.
33rd. So yeah, so he's no, where is he at?
32nd.
32nd. There we go. Yeah, so from a DK perspective, I'm gonna love that, because you're getting all that place differential points, and I still think he's a guy that can get in the top 10, maybe even approach top 5. But as an outright, I don't love it nearly as much. Obviously, you're getting a better number, but it seems like it may be a bridge too far. I don't think he's quite in that Kyle Larson camp. So Brian, based upon all the new lines and new movement, is there anybody that you're interested in potentially adding to your betting card, or somebody that maybe was in consideration that you're no longer going there?
Well, I got to look at the guy who jumped up, 8-1 here, and that's going to be Ryan Blaney, who's getting a start in the 3rd position. I mean, he's starting in the second row for a guy who he ran really fast. I think it was the first practice. He had the fastest car, or second practice. He had the fastest car on the track. You had kind of mentioned him during the first recording as a guy to kind of look at, and starting where he is, he could be that dominator, especially looking at a DK perspective, looking at a dominator points at 9,300, and then looking at betting, you're getting 14-1 for a guy starting almost near the top. I mean, those are great odds.
Yeah, and if you can go check out on, I'm using Racing Reference for this data, but I know NASCAR has this stuff up as well. But you can look at all the information from the 2 practice sessions, and Ryan Blaney, especially in that second session, was incredible. Ran really, really well, and his line didn't get moved from 14 to 12, or from 22 to 14 rather. But it's not as significant as Alex Bowman, and I feel like both of those guys were two of my biggest takeaways from the practice sessions, and Bowman's number moved a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, I think Bowman has really helped out by his strong performance in practice with a first and second fastest car in both stages of practice, and then also getting a starting spot at 7th. I mean, again, you're getting a guy starting near the top who just showed that he can run really fast on this track. Now, like you said, that quote by Kyle Busch's
crew chief. If you're looking at this track in terms of hardening up as far as the surface goes, especially with it starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, I really do think Kyle Busch makes a lot of sense at 12-1, having finished 4 consecutive races at Bristol in the top 5. So Busch at 12-1 is also a huge somebody I'll be looking at. For sure. And I'm also, I think, with the Truck Series getting moved to tomorrow as well, that's why the races moved back. I think that will give us a good indication of maybe how this track may evolve as the day goes along. And I think the truck series running it, even if they're adding a fresh layer of dirt to kind of get it ready for the NASCAR race, I still think it'll be more compact and it'll be more interesting. Outside of those, I know we're, if we're not looking at outrights necessarily, we can look at some placement differential. Ricky Stenhouse is a guy that has some experience on the dirt, has some good success at this track. Yes, he didn't perform as well in the practice sessions as you would like to see, but his number is now down to 25. You can get him plus 650 for a top 3. And, we talked about betting a bunch of those top 10s to try and build that bankroll. And he's plus 115 for the top 10. I think that's a move that could make a lot of sense, especially since he's starting in 13th position.
Yeah. Another guy I wanted to hit on real quick seems to be the only guy whose odds didn't move at all. And that's Chase Briscoe, who he's getting a start. I think it's in the 25th position. Yeah. I mean, to maintain that 12-1 odds right there says something about what Vegas and or other NASCAR people have been saying about this kid and how well he drives, and then going into this race on the dirt. And then, looking at DraftKings real quick, kind of looking forward here, 25th position at a guy who's 4th best odds. I mean, that's a guy I'm going to want in a lot of my lineups.
Oh, for sure. Just had my DK salaries just disappear on me, so I don't really know, but I'm going to pivot and we'll move on from there. It's very nice of Excel just to decide that they were going to go away. Yeah, so there's a lot to like there. Let's switch over and talk some DFS. Let's talk some DraftKings, because I think there's a lot to get into and a lot of interesting options. I do have some of the names that I'm going to be targeting. Ryan Blaney, as you mentioned, starting 3rd, 9,300. Yep. I think makes a ton of sense. Has that dominator ability. I think can easily win this race. And, coming off a win is never a bad thing. Our guy, William Byron, could make some sense as well. Starting 8th, 7,100 makes a hell of a lot of sense. I don't want to get too top heavy. So you got to figure out how you're going to kind of pick and choose who you like. But if you, like Brian and I, think Byron can win this race, the place differential plus the dominator plus the win could be a ton of points. Among the guys that are starting kind of in that top 10 range, Brian, is there any other names that you're finding yourself gravitating towards?
I think it's got to be, so obviously William Byron, I love him coming here. Also really like Ryan Blaney now about where he's starting and his cost. But Alex Bowman, he's only 7,700 and he's starting in a spot ahead of William Byron for a guy who just ran 2 of the fastest laps during practice. And we saw his odds skyrocket so much. So obviously Vegas knows something and thinks something. So he's a guy I'm also going to want to be putting in a bunch of my lineups for those potential dominator points, any movement points, and for, salary savings. Yeah.
I think if you want to get a little different, I think William Byron and Alex Bowman as your dominator potentials could make some sense. Yes, they're both not starting in your top 5, which I usually like to get one of those guys. And if I'm going there, it's either Ryan Blaney or Kyle Busch at 8,900, who are both starting in the top 5. But if you want to pivot a little bit, you could go Byron, Bowman, save yourself a ton of salary, and then load up on the expensive guys that are starting in the middle to the back of the pack. So they could make that could be a nice way, especially in cash. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then, looking at the top of the board there, I do want to re-mention about the Kyle Larson situation. Like, obviously he's the most expensive guy on the slate. He's starting from the pole. So you're looking at those potential laps led, but the fact that he's being moved to the back of the pack makes him an almost impossible person to put into your lineup.
Yeah, so if you're playing a bunch of GPP lineups and you want to put him in one and see how it does, you would need him to basically probably by end of stage 1, early stage 2, get near the front, and then he'd have to win the race in order for it to be worthwhile. So for Brian and I, we're not getting there, but if you want to get reckless and see what happens, I mean that could be an interesting way. As we kind of go from the front of the pack towards the middle, 2 names that stand out for me: Christopher Bell, 11,000. He's expensive, but I think he's worth it. and especially if you start with Byron or Bowman or both, I think it makes it a lot easier. And I think Ryan Newman at 6,900 could make some sense. Has some success in track history at Eldora, so he's comfortable there. Ran okay in the practices, but I'm very curious to see. Like, I know some teams probably went all out to really get a sense of what their car is. Some teams are kind of checking things. And then some teams were like, we need to save our tires. We can't afford to just be burning through all these tires. So let's take it easy and not have, kind of the same run. So Newman is starting 14th, which I don't love. I wish he was starting more like 20 something. But I feel like that could be a nice value on a guy that, below 7K could make some sense.
Yeah, looking more towards the middle of the field, I think my favorite DraftKings player to roster is probably going to be Chase Briscoe, being the starting 25th. He had a top 5 and then a top 10 car in terms of practice. Like I said, he has the 4th best odds for the race, and he's like the 6th most expensive guy, 5th most expensive guy, starting at the middle. So if you're looking for those movement points, you can get him in there with a lineup of like a Byron and a Bowman, and then fill it out with the rest of the guys, which will probably get some good values as well.
Yeah, totally agree. What about our place differential point drivers? We got a few names that are coming to mind. Tyler Reddick at 10.5 makes a lot of sense, who's starting 27th. My boy Stewart Friesen, 32nd. Has potential to move up and get some of those placement points. Like I said, I don't love him as much for betting, but I do like him for DraftKings. I think he will move up, and I think he'll be really popular, especially in cash. And then Chase Briscoe at 9,900, who's starting 25th, could make a ton of sense as well.
Yeah, I like the Briscoe. Obviously, I like Chase Briscoe, but I'm going back. I mentioned it during the first podcast. Ty Dillon getting the last place start here. He's starting 30. Well, he'll be second to last now with Kyle Larson right behind him. Getting that spot, he's going to have the potential of. I mean, even if he moves up 10 spots, you're looking at positive points here for 6,600. And he had a top 28, top 30 car in practice. So, I mean, he's obviously using less than par equipment, but he is a driver who is familiar on the dirt and this kind of racing. So early on in the race, you could see him move up pretty quick. Yeah, if you can get a top 20 on him, or like 18 or something, I think you'd be loving life. And he's super cheap, so getting even if he only gets to say 25 or 30, you're still getting that movement, and you're still saving a ton of salary. So yeah, he's definitely somebody that, if you want to save some money, could make a hell of a lot of sense. Okay, Brian, let's so we talked DK, we talked betting, we obviously are holding William Byron tickets, so we're very excited about that. At this point, with the board the way it's currently set up, is there a bet or two that you really like, that you think, maybe not necessarily your best bet, but something that you're a big fan of, that you think could make a ton of sense with the odds as they currently sit? I think just looking at what has transpired over, today and stuff like that, looking at like an Alex Bowman top 5 prop, I think makes a ton of sense, considering he showed it today and where he's starting in the field, and then adding that with a Byron top 5, not just a top 10, but a top 5, being that he is getting, a pretty good start here inside the top 10 as well, makes probably the 2 bets that I would probably be leaning on the most. And then I think I'll probably lean Kyle Busch. I'll go to the well one more time as an outright, just knowing that as they get deeper into the night with colder temperatures, the track is likely to kind of harden up even more so than it will after having a race even prior to this. Yeah. So yeah, I think those 3 are probably the ones I'll look at the most. Yeah, I think Kyle Busch 12-1 makes a hell of a lot of sense, and probably somebody will be adding to my outright card. I like Briscoe at even it's plus 160 for a top 5. I think that makes some sense. I also think. Yeah, I think that Kyle Busch plus 245 for a top 5. I like that a lot. You don't have to get crazy and take that big number,
Ryan Blaney plus 230 for a top 5. I think that makes a hell of a lot of sense. The top 5 market seems to be a little soft, so check that out at your local books. And as we said, Brian, thanks to our commenter, maybe we should look at some not top 5 options. Some drivers that traditionally run well, like Kevin Harvick. We might be able to find a nice number on him.
You can get plus money on Kyle Larson right now, not top 5, because those are a lot of placements. Those are a lot of placement points to move up. It's plus
I like that a lot.
133.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And that could be a nice way where if you want to, if you're planning on fading Larson across the board, could make a lot of sense. Plus 133 to not make it. I think that's a bet I could definitely get behind.
Yeah, because it's interesting, especially if this track maintains what they're hoping for in a dirt race, at least half the race. It's going to be extremely hard for Larson to move up through the field on the dirt, as opposed to a hardened NASCAR track where speed is everything and you're not having to drift in the corners.
Yeah. I think it's a great call. Because even if he, even from moves up 33 points and gets into that like 6, 7, 8 range, like that's still not top 5. Like,
exactly. So, like that's a lot of movement.
Yeah. Or if he crashes or pops a tire and has to fill it on the track, there's a lot that could go wrong. So I think that's a great call. So Kyle Larson, not top 5, Kyle Busch outright. And then I'm going to go, who was my top 5 that I was looking at? Oh, William Byron, top 5 plus 375. Yes, please give me that all day. I still think there's value with him. And then who was your top 5?
So I like Bowman and Byron.
Bowman and Byron, and then Chase Briscoe. I think could make some sense, even though his number's a little short, but I like it anyways. Cool. So Brian, this was fun. Good to have some more sense of where everybody's starting and get a better understanding. We're not just throwing darts in the dark here with no track history. So tomorrow should be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully we cash that Byron winner and then fills our bankroll for the next month or so of NASCAR bets. So enjoy the college hoops, enjoy the NASCAR. I will be watching the F1 race tomorrow morning. I'm very excited about that. For Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to y'all next time.